This is Jonathan Ferguson, the Keeper of Firearms and Artillery at the Royal Armouries Museum in the UK, which houses a collection of thousands of iconic weapons from throughout history. And I'm your host, Dave Jewett, and today on this episode, sponsored by Gallipoli, we're breaking down some of the weapons of the newest entry into the World War I game series.
Get me out of here! Get me out!
When you get suppressed, it changes the reload animation. It's one of the most interesting ways a game has implemented a suppression mechanic that I have seen. I really hope other games take inspiration from it.
Yes, please.
If you're suppressed and in a panic state, the load isn't as smooth. He's bashing the cartridge off like the side of the chamber. You're struggling to get it in. Even on the Lewis gun, you can't find the point to get the pan magazine on.
The idea that external factors make you slower is fantastic. Really, really appreciate that.
Like the video if you enjoyed, subscribe for more like this, and now without further ado, it's over to Jonathan.
This is going to look an awful lot like a short magazine Lee-Enfield, certainly from the iron sights view, because for all intents and purposes, it is. Same drills. We have a solid charger clip guide there now. Ignore the bit sticking out the end. That is a Morris tube for sub-caliber training, caliber conversion. People tend to think the Metford was replaced almost overnight because the Cordite powder propellant, not powder at all, looks like spaghetti, wore out the rifling. Well, it did, but it took thousands of rounds for that to happen, so they stayed in service. Would there still be, admittedly, an upgraded, product improved Lee-Metford charger loading still in service in 1915? Probably. Would it be on the front lines in Gallipoli? More of an open question, I would say. But it gives us some variety in our rifles. The only significant change, so we have our, obviously, longer barrel, old school, with the curved sight protectors, not the enclosed nose cap of the shorter SMLE, of course. We don't have the SMLE rear sights. We have a windage adjustable notch there where I'm pointing, and then we have a flip up. So I guess not a million miles away from the SMLE, but it's a less robust. I mean, it's traditional. They're more like target sights. They're not aperture sights, but they are more kind of fine adjustment, a bit more target influence. The great thing about the SMLE was those nice big AK style ramp sights, tangent sights, where you move the slider and it moves the aperture up. Open sights, nice short radius for quick target acquisition.
When I was keeping an eye open for details during all the reloads and all the movements, I noticed that it actually says for cordite only above the maker's mark.
Ah. So, well spotted, Dave. For cordite only does change things somewhat. That means by default, this is a charger loading Lee-Enfield of some kind. But the only place you'll see for cordite only marked is on a commercial rifle. I don't know about surplus, but certainly rifles made to the military pattern and sold abroad, so South Africa, for example, would be marked for cordite only because you've got different types of propellant and they had issues with smokeless propellant that wasn't cordite. So they've very nicely modelled whichever rifle they had to hand, which may well have been marked as a Metford, although it shouldn't be. And then it's a commercial market rifle. There'd be no need to mark it for cordite only. Well, you wouldn't want to do that on a Lee-Metford because that's designed to fire black powder loaded ammunition because Britain wasn't ready for the big time with its own smokeless propellant, which turned out to be cordite. And so they had to go with a compressed pellet of black powder. Not quite the velocity that they wanted ultimately, but close. Good enough for government work, as they say. And it was only when they started firing the new cordite rounds in the Metford barreled rifles, or Metford rifled barrels on those rifles, which was like a polygonal form of rifling, so like rounded shoulders. Works fine today, arguably, for rifles. Certainly works for pistols, but with the softer or less quality metallurgy of the day, it would erode that rifling and they'd wear out too quickly. Hence, we get the Lee-Enfield. That's where we go from 1888, Lee-Metford, 1895, Lee-Enfield. That's the major change. I think it omits that marking because a British soldier isn't going to be using a commercial pattern rifle. So this turned out to be a bit of a rabbit hole, and it's fascinating because it's in being so exacting in the detail that maybe this has gone a little bit sideways, but very, very easy to resolve. Nice view there of the charger loading. It gives it its name. The bullets They look very much like fresh lead to me, like somebody's hand-load unjacketed lead bullets. But the Mk.II round-nosed bullets, questionable as to those are still in frontline service in 1915, but regardless, they're around. Those might look that shiny. They have a gilding metal jacket. They look like silver bullets. A good friend of mine found one of those, fired one on Arthur's seat and gave it to me as a gift. And I sadly lost it because I accidentally took it to the airport and I didn't think they'd look very kindly on even a fired bullet. But anyway, that I think is what's being represented there. It's just in this lighting, at least, it looks like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what they're going for. That's what they've modeled it off. It can look a bit like hand loads with unjacketed lead bullets, which some people do shoot, but I think that's just a red herring that's come from my brain. This rifle is shooting sort of appropriate ammunition for what it is, i.e. like a second line rifle, substitute standard to the SMLE. But if it was on frontline service, it should have Mk.VII ammunition with the pointed bullet and the yellowish copper jacket, I would say. So I'll be interested to see if the ammunition changes with the SMLE when we get to that. Otherwise, honestly, this looks great, including the ammunition for what it's representing. So the rimmed cases. We can see some effort expended to get those rounds out of the clip and into the action. That's good. Often it's far too straightforward in games. It's effortless. Well, if you've ever done it, you know it's not effortless. Sometimes it's more effortless than others, but often, especially in a heated, literally, exchange like this, you need to put some force in there, directed very, very judiciously. Otherwise, you can't just apply more brute force to get the rounds in. Not going to work. Good action on the bolt there. That will apply to the SMLE as well. So we're grasping overhand. Sound effects wise, a really skilled shooter, military shooter of the period, it really is like clack clack. It's like two sound. You only hear two sounds. They're so fast and so slick with it. Yes, someone like me does it. It's clack 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 clack. But these guys, I would expect it should sound a little bit more. But, subjective. By this point, not everyone is the British Expeditionary Force level of skill. Those guys, sadly, a lot of them are dead, and it's a different campaign as well, different theatre. So we can perhaps forgive slightly more stilted bolt manipulation than the astonishingly slick work that they were doing in August 1914 that allegedly, and I do tend to believe this, by the way, helped to stop the German advance on the Western Front. A sheer volume of accurate aim fire at a rate of at least 15 rounds per minute. In many cases, more than that. 15 was the minimum. So this guy should be doing 15. And I'm not going to time it, but he may or may not be. Worth mentioning, I suppose, that if you were to encounter Long Lees or even Lee-Metfords, if they are still in frontline service, this is where you're going to find them, because the focus of logistics is on the Western Front. Legacy variants like this are more likely to crop up, I dare say, on the eastern side of things. We can see the cocking piece flying forward to obviously initiate the round there. Lewis gun from the shoulder. Not a great idea, but definitely was done. Even done from aircraft, which always blows my mind. Or at least one guy did it. Just like free offhand firing Lewis guns from the observer's seat in an aircraft. Absolute madness. Resting it on the sandbags, great. Even flipping up the sights there. That's nice. Now they are set to, was it 400 yards?
Yeah, using this from the shoulder or from the hip is not advised. It's very much a desperation move when you're taking a trench or a position.
Good. Yeah, which is exactly right.
And the reload changes, the speed of the reload changes if you've got the weapon deployed versus if you've got the weapon in hand.
Yep.
So that marking under the sight, 303 Mk.VII, that's a denotion to the round that it's firing.
That's right, yeah. So the Lewis gun was only ever intended to be used and might not even function properly with Mk.II ammunition, just because of the shape of the bullet. I wouldn't be risking it. There wouldn't be a need to risk it. As far as I know, only Mk.VII was on issue. And that was used throughout both World Wars. There was a Mk.VIII that was more like a modern bullet with a boat tail on it. That was only used for machine guns, although some was appropriated by at least one sniper because it had a better ballistic capability. Exterior ballistics, external ballistics were better with it, but better ballistic coefficient. So it would fly more accurately further, basically. But vast majority, including Lewis gunners, they're not going to be using Mk.VIII. That was for the Vickers gun. And anyway, different conflict. The detail's really nice on the painted markings on the magazine there. I think they're there must be referencing real examples as far as possible, which is a little risky because you might be finding something that was in service later with different markings, but in this case, fine, and lends a bit of immersion when things are not pristine, bit of chipped paint there. But of course, the guns themselves are not covered in paint, so that shouldn't look like worn paint, like a replica or something. It's just the paint that's been used on the magazine there to help you orientate the magazine correctly in low light, is the idea with that. White, hopefully not glow-in-the-dark paint. You can see how much the sight picture is jumping around and how very difficult it would be to maintain like a rifle sight picture with it.
Yeah, machine guns are so powerful in this game. It's a common theme throughout the World War I series. That's sort of why they restrict them, because as in the First World War, machine guns were extremely powerful. They offered the users an extreme advantage compared to a bolt-action rifle. And you do get a sense of that when you're getting volley fire in return and you have the advantage of a 47-round pan.
Yeah. Now, it's been longer than I care to remember since I fired a Lewis gun, but that seems like excessive muzzle flash. For the daylight, for the long barrel on this weapon, not to mention you've got the diameter of the air cooling jacket, which would hide from the shooter some of that flash. I think it's a little excessive. Then again, you're talking about machine guns being more powerful. Maybe the player doesn't feel it's that powerful unless there's a flash at the end of the muzzle. Obviously, the power of the machine gun comes in the rate of fire. It's identical ammunition, identical muzzle velocity, identical effect on target. What the advantage there is, as you say, 47 rounds on board in the case of the Lewis, and that slow, controllable, but still automatic rate of fire in an era when there are precious few self-loading rifles, much less automatic. So that Lewis gun sight, minor detail there, as you can probably tell, if you're trying to work out what distance these sights are permanently set to, because you can't adjust them in the game, of course, well, you can't, because there's no mark on there to tell you where that rear aperture is actually set to. If we're reading off the top, bottom, somewhere in the middle, there should be a mark there to line it up. Super tiny detail. If you could use the sights, it would matter. As you can't, it doesn't really, but worth perhaps mentioning. Where would a First World War FPS be without scoped sniper rifles? It's the first conflict that they are, well, that's not strictly true. The American Civil War would be the first conflict in which they make a difference on the battlefield, or even used in any significant numbers on the battlefield. But in the First World War, we enter it, pretty much, certainly by 1915, the German army well ahead. So we have the Austro-Hungarian Model 95 rifle with a scope by sort of mid-1915, and the G98 with the scope also by then. I'm not even sure which one came first. I would guess the German, but don't quote me. So we have a significant advantage on that side of things. The Allies, Entente Cordiale, not really there yet. The French get the Lebel with an offset scope, which isn't ideal. It's sometime in 1915 as well. Brits managed to get something into service, but not in significant numbers a bit later on. And it's also an offset scope, not ideal. Now, this iteration on the G98 is also offset, but it's not crazy offset to give you the full charger loading experience that the British War Office was convinced was necessary. Some of them weren't happy about that and just used the iron sights, and there weren't enough of them by 1918 to really make much difference.
This is reloaded through clips. Would that have not been the case?
So the British War Office wanted the clip loading. This version of the G98 is also offset to allow for that. There's more correction of these kind of what seems good off the battlefield not turning out to be good on the battlefield. My impression is the German army are more reactive and responsive to that. So we do find G98s with scopes fully over the bore, and from memory, that's the one we have on display here in Leeds. I wasn't able to hoik that out of its case to show here, but that is the more commonly found, not that they're common, but G98 with scope, Goetz scope, probably over the bore, which is where we see them on later sniper rifles, sacrificing the ability to clip load for single loading. But if you're a sniper, that's what you want. You can always have 5 rounds in the weapon ready to go. You don't need to be able to quickly get 5 more into it. You would much rather have the sight line of the scope coinciding with the line of the bore. So you only have the height over the bore to worry about, not the offset to the left. But even so, the Germans managed to engineer it so that it was not so crazy offset to the left. Don't think that matters at all for the game. other than they've gone for something that's earlier. So 1915 is still relatively early doors, as we say over here. And of course, the bolt handle turned down and the stock cut away to accommodate that, because even with it offset slightly, your bolt handle might clear going straight up, but you can't get your hand around it with the scope in the way. So they turned down the bolt handle.
It's interesting that they even name drop the scope model in the kill feed.
Oh yeah, there we go. Go at scope. Yeah. So these early scopes are all 3.5 to, I think from memory, this is like a 3 3/4 magnification or something like that. I think it's slightly less than 4, often cited as 4. So it's really what we now regard as a battlefield optic, an infantry optic, but very, very common for snipers. Full-on snipers. The Germans had proper sniper schools before the other nations did. The Scharfschützen, sharpshooter. In English, that has a different connotation. In German, it's the literal meaning of sniper, or the other way around, perhaps, arguably. So they are well-trained, fieldcraft, crawling slowly into position, camouflage, all of that, one shot, one kill. Now, of course, they might find themselves employed more like what we regard as sharpshooters, designated marksmen, in this kind of open warfare. Well, maybe not open warfare, but more trench-based, relatively open compared to the Western Front, where you are essentially fire support or supporting the rest of a unit. Now, they did have dedicated sniping sections. Well, it's British terminology, but units of snipers at battalion level. German snipers were trained and expected to operate in pairs. That's something else that you can try to simulate playing the game if you want to. If you want to get another friend playing, doesn't have to be a sniper. The number 2, as it were, might not have a sniper rifle per se. They are observing, spotting.
There is a spotter class, so
Cool.
If you want that dynamic, it is
Good.
available to you.
Good.
And it is often quite handy. And the thing is, when I'm behind this sniper shield as well, I felt, obviously I had the advantage of having that bit of cover, but because you've just got that rectangle to look through, your sort of peripheral vision is so obstructed that it is very handy to have someone be like, when you finish shooting that guy, there's a guy that you can't see because there's a plate of steel in the way. You need to adjust.
In reality, the big job of the spotter is to observe where your shots are missing and talk you on to score a shot, and just be your eyes. Now that's more like what you're talking about there. You're in the scope, you're sort of very focused. Part of the reason for the lower magnification, it's not that they couldn't achieve higher magnifications, although with the optics of the era, perhaps a limitation. It's more about balancing field of view to actually identify and then engage a target with the magnification that gives you target identification, sort of aim small, miss small, because you're zoomed in effectively, which is the real advantage in playing the game. Not having to align your iron sights, just one single point of reference there between target and your eye sitting in the middle. That's all great too. The sniper plate is very cool. I'm sure they were used on the Eastern Front. We are seeing trench type warfare going on here, but of the more open desert type variety. That's fine. They were more a feature of the Western Front because of that static warfare, and a lot of sniping was done from a trench, a frontline trench, and they would install sniper plates, loopholes along the trench line, and you wouldn't necessarily know which one the sniper would pop up in. And this is why some officers in particular would send home for big game rifles with big old 416 Rigby or something bullets to smash through the sniper plate, or at least sort of stove it in and deny it to the enemy, because they were sufficient against standard ball ammunition. So you could shoot at it all day unless you happened to get it into the aperture. If the sniper was even there to get hit, that was a real problem. So including them in the game is great. Lots of different varieties of those. And the good old Martini makes an appearance, because of course it does. Versions of it around. So the Turks are still using their version of the Martini, or equivalent to the Martini-Henry, the Peabody-Martini. This, though, is a British Martini. You can see that from the inspection mark. It's either a Mk.IV, I think it is a Mk.IV Martini-Henry.
Yeah, game's calling it Mk.IV. It's quite interesting going from bolt action rifles to this, one round at a time. You really felt that you had to hit. You've got to hit with this round, because you can't just cycle a bolt and get another one in. You will find yourself in a spot of bother if you miss.
Spot of bother seems like the right thing to say when you're holding a Martini-Henry, doesn't it? So the Mk.IV was originally designed for the small bore 402 caliber round, which is still massive. It's a flatter trajectory, better accuracy. That project failed, and so they were just made, or effectively converted and then made, in the standard 4.5 Martini cartridge.
It's one of my favourite details, which I was loving every time it popped up. When you get suppressed, it changes the reload animation. It's one of the most interesting ways a game has implemented a suppression mechanic that I have seen. I really hope other games take inspiration from it.
Yes, please.
If you're suppressed and in a panic state, the reload becomes a lot longer. Obviously, there's an audio cue of the guy panicking, but like with the Martini, the load isn't as smooth. He's bashing the cartridge off like the side of the chamber. If you're loading a bolt action with a charger, you're struggling to get it in. Even on the Lewis gun, you can't find the point to get the pan magazine on. Every gun has a special like panicked reload, and it works so well. It's very thematic. It adds up to that authenticity. I really think it's a very interesting way to implement a suppression mechanic. It's great.
That's big news, frankly. Small detail, big news, because I can't believe I've never thought of that. I think I've talked about kind of mini-game approaches to changing reload, because I don't hate it, but the traditional way of doing reloads, obviously in FPS games of any kind, is just animation plays of a given length and back at it. Maybe if it's like a slide lock reload or whatever, there's a variation there, but something like this, I guess it would be, well, so single shot Martini, it's going to be the same length reload every time. It almost feels quite mechanical. You're like holding down the fire button, if the game lets you do that. I like it when it doesn't. That slight frustration of having to like repress to reload or press a separate button to reload, I appreciate. The idea that external factors make you slower is fantastic. Really, really appreciate that. In an ideal world, you'd somehow, well, I guess VR is where you can sort of do this, because you are the weak link in trying to get that weapon reloaded. You can't simulate that. Really, really like that. Dare say people will copy that.
So you mentioned the Ottoman variant of the Martini, the Peabody. I'd not heard of the Peabody variant before, so thought we'd include it today.
So, American-made variant of the Martini. So not a Martini-Henry, because it has to have Henry pattern rifling to be a Martini-Henry. Here's one of ours, and if you are wondering, you can see those reinforcing ears on the side of the body or receiver there. That very SMLE looking stocking and rear sight, well, Mauser really, it's more like a Mauser rear sight. So, yeah, looking good, including the very visible marking there.
A nice comfy place to put your thumb.
Which is on all the Martini, well, not all the Martinis, but certainly on the traditional Martini-Henry. And after you fire your first one without putting your thumb on the thumb rest, you soon realise why, because your own knuckle squashes your nose if it's kind of rubbery like mine. Or breaks it potentially if it isn't. You don't do it more than once, and you soon learn to use the thumb rest. Even on, I noticed actually on the Mk.IV British Martini earlier, which, by the way, I'm not aware of any evidence of those actually getting used, I should say. It's not impossible that it'd be there, but I'm not aware of any use of them in combat by the British at Gallipoli, or even in that campaign generally, that theatre generally. But this one was definitely there, and even that Mk.IV British one with the slightly weird humped receiver, you've still got somewhere to put your thumb, even though it's not kind of marked out and doesn't have like checkering on it, which the others do. The Peabody marking, by the way, it should be visible to you on camera, I think. So, American contract to make Martini pattern rifles. Let's not forget, Friedrich von Martini was Swiss, not British. So, it's not like they're using the British rifle per se. And this one is converted to 7.65mm, somewhat higher velocity, flatter shooting rounds than the traditional 11mm 45 or even the 402 experimental. Does it say what ammunition this one's using? Sorry.
No, it's a different model though. The cartridge is a different model.
I would imagine that it's the converted version, because this is not like an anomaly that some Brit has still got his hands on a Martini Mk.IV. This is a current service weapon of the Ottoman army, so it ought to be in there. 7.65 rifle caliber. So recognisably, it's this, for the very reason that we have these reinforcements here. So they're not present on the original big old black powder round. It is, as it appears, reinforced, converted to a modern rifle cartridge. So just as the Brits do with the 303 Martinis, but they are very much not frontline weapons. And of course the Ottoman army has more modern, better rifles than this. These are themselves like second line rifles, but they do end up getting used in anger because of a lack of availability of the frontline versions, frontline Mausers.
Because there's so much detail in this game, I actually found myself trying to listen to see if the jangling of ammunition stopped when you ran out of ammunition, when you grabbed that last round. I was almost expecting them to actually model in, if you've run out of bullets, the last one doesn't jangle when you reach into your pocket full of rounds.
That seems, even for me, a bridge too far. But if they did do that, we would appreciate it. So if the Martini or Peabody Martini is kind of your last ditch weapon, let me just take this scabbard off, giving slight giveaway. We have got here the 1903 Mauser, a much more modern and capable bolt action magazine rifle, of course, but we've still got our big old bayonet there. It's even longer on camera, I think. This is in astonishingly nice condition, actually. All the bluing still intact. We got the Turkish markings there. Short but straight bolt handle on these, and there are those Mauser pattern sights that we see on the Peabody Martini, almost kind of retro-fitted to the Martini design. A modern combat style tangent rear sight, which the Mauser's been doing for a while by 1903 even, much less 1915 where we are. But it's the model 1903 that the Ottomans have standardized on as best they can. They end up with all sorts of crazy stuff, like Frankenstein's monster mashup Enfield Mausers, which we have a couple of in the collection here. Be interested to see if those make it into this game. You can even see, this is the level of detail that they are going for here. On the bolt handle, I hope you can see it. Trust me if not. There's a little crescent. That little crescent inspection mark there. That's on the bolt knob of this rifle in the game that I'm looking at. Ah, we have a partially completed reload there. Bolt open, rounds go in.
Yes. So if you don't close the bolt after reloading, the bolt will stay open, and you might find yourself in a position where you bring the weapon up to aim, try to fire, and the game will go, no, you got to close that bolt, my friend, and you have to then complete the animation, and then you're ready to fire it once more. Again, another nice detail.
Yeah, really, really good. That's another thing. It breaks the artificiality of, is that a word? Of the play animation reload shoot again thing. Makes it much more interactive and immersive. I don't remember ever seeing that.
Because you might find yourself in a situation where you don't get the opportunity to finish a reload. You have to go to bayonet or move position, and the game tracks whether or not you have finished chambering that round and are ready to fire again.
And are you just pressing the same reload? Or you just press reload again and it finishes the reload for you, I guess?
Yeah, either you try to fire and then the reload will continue, or you just hit reload to finish the movement.
The clip I picked that up on, we've got our bolt handle still up. I actually think the bolt was forward, but the handle wasn't down. So it can be interrupted at almost any point in the cycle by the look of it. Instead of the old days where you get the reload nearly finished, get interrupted, and you're back to being completely empty again, and you have to just do the whole reload animation again. This seems to stop at almost any point.
I only detected it when the bolt was up. So I think you might be locked into it at some point, but that's the sort of major, like, midpoint of the reload.
Yeah. Okay. Well, even if they've just picked that point to kind of pick you back up at, so bolt forward, so round nearly chambered, but the bolt up. And what I saw was you had to go to the bayonet and then get the bolt handle down and locked.
That's right.
Because obviously it doesn't shoot otherwise. Very cool indeed. Now I better put the scabbard back on this before I have someone's eye out. Mainly mine, I dare say. Mind you, but the bayonet on this is quite brutal, worth a look. Well, all bayonets are brutal, obviously, but it's a pipe back, so a round section at the top of the blade, which which isn't that apparent, but then you see it passes through the point, reinforcing the point centrally. So it becomes a mid-rib, essentially, to the point, making it nice and reinforced. So it reinforces the spine until it gets to the point, and then it's reinforcing the point. So it should be stronger as a design. Lots of different theories on how to make the ideal bayonet blade. Kind of still are. Yeah, so I guess the big giveaway here versus the long, I'm going to call it a long Lee, with the fixed charge bridge, which this has. Probably the big giveaway, because even the sight protectors look very similar from first person, are the big rear sight protectors sticking up, protecting that tangent sight. What's he talking about? Well, so this is actually a sectioned example. So looks a bit more like a rifle this way around, albeit with some extra ventilation. But there is the left one of those rear sight protectors, a little bit wobbly because it's missing half of itself. And those are necessary, of course, because the sights are exposed on the top of the weapon. If you drop it on a rock, that very critical, it's not an aperture, but it's still critical to keep it that nice crisp shape, can get damaged. So those two sight protectors on the Mk.III certainly are visible. Much used in video games, obviously, much more so than the long Lees and Metfords. This is a beautiful cutaway, really nicely done. We don't like to see firearms get chopped up, but if you're going to chop one up, do it this way. You can even see the bedding of the barrel there at those 2 points there, which has to be done in a fairly precise manner, even for an infantry rifle, and another point at the front behind the nose cap. It's even got a cutaway bolt head and bolt body there. So you're really seeing every detail if you need it. And the really easy to understand bit is the trigger mechanism, where as the bolt comes forward, it is, well, the cocking piece is hung up on the sear, the trigger is engaged with the sear, and as I press down, that wishbone shape drops down from under the cocking piece and it flies forward. Very simple mechanism, did the job. So there again is that Mk.II ammunition. It really should be pointed, copper alloy, copper coloured bullets by this point. I maybe also wouldn't be inserting the rounds like exaggerately base first like that. It doesn't harm to do that, but it's not really necessary. With the way the Enfield magazine works, you just want to, if you're single loading, drop the thing into the top of the magazine and just push straight down, quite deliberately. And the magazine design will assert those rims one in front of the other, which of course can be a problem. More on modern rifles where the ammunition isn't to the military specification and maybe the rifle's a bit worn out. You never read any issues with that rim over rim stoppage thing that people talk about today in period. Literally never come across it. I'm sure there's some example, and maybe it's a case of the soldier is not being specific in their memoir, in their oral history account, whatever, and they just talk about jams. But if it was that big a deal, you'd expect them to talk about it. Really nicely modelled SMLE. Our section 1's a bit of a red herring for that, but I thought you might like to see it. The only thing that I can kind of nitpick on this is, again, a commercial marking on what should be a military issue rifle. So on that exposed bit of the barrel there, the Knox form of the barrel, where it inserts into the receiver ring or the body, the action body, there is a really nicely rendered BSA stand of arms, so like a TP of 3 rifles logo, Birmingham Small Arms Company, not there on military rifles. So that is a commercial marking. And again, if you see that on a rifle you're modeling for your game, I totally understand why you'd want to put that cool detail in there. Military rifle markings are more boring often than the commercial markings. Not so much for things like unit markings, they obviously give us history, give us important context, but the standard markings can be a bit less of a flourish there. So a BSA made SMLE or other Enfield will have the markings on the wrist under the bolt handle, not on this one because it's been cut away. But, and they will say, if it's made by BSA, it will just say BSA there without the nice little flourish of their logo. That's for commercial sale. So, rifle grenade is a nice touch. Rod grenade, specifically, is the type. And kind of say what you see. That's why they're called rod grenades, because they're a grenade with a rod screwed into the base of them. Nothing too advanced. And you have a propelling cartridge, which is a sort of glorified blank cartridge that you're loading first there. For safety reasons, and I can't remember the drill, but personally, I'd be wanting to load the grenade down the barrel and then insert the cartridge. But I dare say, and I think from memory, it might well be correct that you load the propelling cartridge first. Anyway, health and safety in the middle of a war, a world war no less, not really the same huge deal that it is today. The type of grenade it is appears to be, and I am not an expert on rifle grenades or rod grenades, but so this is the number 35, and as the number would indicate, I've got no filler cap there, just I guess helps show that it's inert, as if the giant free from explosive stickers that someone has helpfully stuck to this object weren't enough. This cylindrical body looks quite primitive and early, and relatively it is, but this pattern wasn't approved until 1918. So the version that I think should be on here, and there are others, but most of them, and all of them actually, there's one with a sort of inverse cone shape, but they all have these fragmentation serrations on them. So I think this is the pattern that really we should be seeing, with obviously a rod screwed into the base there. So I think I'm right in saying this is too late for the setting. And it's the number 3 that I think would be a more appropriate choice for this particular time period. It's a very confusing subject. Things are changing very rapidly. There are multiple different ones in service. And if training's any guide, most of them were still in service right the way through, even after the cup launcher is introduced as well.
Game features some interesting optics.
Yes, it does. Hold that thought.
Holding.
So these are something I looked at a few years ago.
Yeah, the game features both the Latty sight and a Martin sight. Yeah, this first Latty sight that we're seeing, I found it to be more of a hindrance than anything. Obviously, the slight, like the reticle and the little bit of magnification was helpful, but that housing on the rear of it, I was like,
Yeah.
just give me the iron sights back, honestly.
I know. Yeah, it's a shame. So we really need to acquire our own set of Latty sights. Those have gone to see an arsenal, which is a very good home, and they were able to shoot a weapon with them on there, which is great. The Martin, which I'm looking at now, we have 3 patterns. I won't confuse you with the other 2, but the Martin sight that we have comes in this little box, and we're missing the rear sight, very sadly, which you can see there clipped on to give you the right aperture you need for this, which is the front sight. As you see, well, actually, it's not quite the same pattern, but this is a Martin pattern sight, allegedly. A little bit hard to show you in detail. Oh, there we go. See the reticle effectively there. And it actually is a reticle of sorts, in that it's a ring. Reticle, as in reticulated, strictly speaking, means a ring. We use it today for all sorts of aiming. Well, what in a game is like a cursor kind of thing. So that's incomplete, unfortunately. But these are, the Galilean optics, as they're known, are a very early form of optic. They predate the tube telescope. In the Georgian period, very limited use. Target rifles, I guess, or target guns, potentially, not necessarily rifles. Yeah, I don't know if the pattern room's got that wrong, or if there are different Martin pattern sights. Actually, I'm dimly remembering that there might be. I do have some notes somewhere on this. This form, the Martin sight, it's really a traditional rear aperture, like a micrometer adjustable rear aperture. It just has a slightly magnifying front sight, which, yeah, seems less helpful, because you're still having to align 2 sights. All you're getting, the only benefit you're getting, is a slightly magnified view for, well, a bit more precision. You've got quite a pinpoint reticle there, which I suppose is what the traditional German post is trying to do. That's on the G98 sniper that we saw, where you put the very point of that on your target so as not to obscure it, and you can be a bit more accurate. Better way is a very fine floating reticle of some kind, and that etched reticle on that front lens is effectively that. But the way this works, you kind of still need that rear aperture, which kind of feels to me a bit redundant. They're also very vulnerable to getting clobbered. But there were officially purchased, if I remember rightly, Latty and Martin sights by the Brits. Quantities of both, which is interesting. Nice detail, by the way, if we're looking at the Mauser rifles versus the Lee-Enfield rifles in this game. The Mausers, they're bolting forward on the clip when it's empty, and that will knock it out of the way. On the Enfield, there are lugs in the way that won't let you do that, so you do remove the clip, which we see the character doing. Now, the Mk.VI Webley revolver, absolutely iconic, honking great 4.55 service pistol, completely appropriate for the First World War and for the Eastern Theatre. Not necessarily, well, depends in 1915 when this is taking place, but this is only coming in 1915, so they wouldn't be super common. This is still the standard version of the Webley revolver, the Mk.V. So shorter barrel, 4-inch barrel, and the bird's head curved grip. Otherwise, very, very similar. That's perhaps a more appropriate choice, but of course, not impossible that the more iconic, let's be honest, version, the Webley Mk.VI, would be present.
I decided to pair this with my bag of jam tin grenades as well.
Absolutely. Although they're they got different labels on them.
Oh yeah, you got
Amazing.
Strawberry jam, you got condensed milk, you got beef, whatever you get your hands on. You can tell it was a bit of a last-ditch weapon.
Yeah, no, I love the variety. That's, again, so used to in games, just getting the same thing over and over again. Variety. You know, animations that play out slightly differently, especially if they're affected by, situationally affected in the game. And then, yeah, different textures for different things. Ultimately, I'd like to see a slightly different texture on every single weapon in a game. I think that's a little exacting and unfair. But the different size tins and labels on the jam tin grenade, they matter more because those really were variable things that you would notice potentially. If they were all uniform, it might be a little, not distracting, but a bit less immersive.
More associated with the Anzac forces, right? So it makes sense that it's on the Ottoman front in Gallipoli.
I think universally in use, but inevitably the main body of the British armed forces, army, gets the priority, we find, in both world wars. So that, the mother country, as it were, or the lead nation of the Commonwealth, whatever you want to call it, tends to prioritize its own forces first. So if you're lacking shipments of grenades, of course you're gonna, and they're used so much, perhaps more so used on the Western Front, of course, because of all the trench systems, and they're going through them like nobody's business. So I would be amazed if they haven't based all of those on real examples that they found. We don't have any. It's a weird quirk of this collection that our grenades that we've ended up with are pretty patchy as a collection. Wasn't a priority. The armories didn't really collect grenades. We have a handful of maybe 17th century cast iron ones. We have one Asian type ceramic one, and then we have a smattering of modern inert ones, all inert, from the pattern room collection, and that's kind of it. Not really a priority. There are collectors of grenades out there, but I guess it wasn't traditionally that common. They tend to blow up, so there's not much left of them.
If they're working properly, at least.
Yes, if they're working properly. They are a bit of a hazard to keep when they're not fully free from explosives, so various reasons why. And they're just not as kind of, I don't want to use the S word, they're not as exciting to the average person as, say, a rifle or a machine gun. Artillery has its own problem, I think, of being big crew-served thing that is a bit of a black art and not really known in the civilian world in the same way that firearms are. And we're all guilty of neglecting artillery, including me, despite my job title. Interesting choice for a pistol, this one. The Beholla, named for the company of Becker and Hollander, which is marked on the slide there. Relatively uncommon. Almost feels like a made-up design if you're used to, the standard First World War product range, if I can call it that. Quite a simple, striker-fired design. Fixed barrel. Blowback. Because it's only .765 caliber. Really quite small. It's like a modern sort of subcompact size. And I think you get that from the scale of it in the game and the way the animation or the character is holding it. It does feel quite small in the hand. Now theirs is a little bit more rounded on the edges maybe, but these are all a bit variable. So I've actually got two here. And yeah, they are different shapes. Hopefully you'll see they've got different profiles there. Slightly. And clearly the one they've modeled has a different profile again. These are, I mean, not atypical at all of pistols in the early to mid 20th century, still being hand finished. So I dare say, if I was to dare to take the slides off and try to swap these over, that they would not fit. I can see by eye that they would not fit, actually. So all this interchangeable parts stuff people love to talk about, not a thing for everything until probably the end of World War II. So even by German makers. I know, shocking. We think of them as being super exacting in their manufacturing. Well, mostly they were, but old Becker and Hollander still doing it the old way. Ours, interestingly, has a Becker and Hollander logo grip. Or one of the two here. BH.
In my experience, it was probably the weakest pistol I played with.
Makes sense, yeah.
It fired quite quickly, which I think makes it suitable for... It's one of the sidearm options for the sniper, but also the weapon that the stretcher bearer class can use.
Okay.
So, in theory, stretcher bearer, you're up close healing people, rapid fire helps, or as a backup weapon for a sniper to get some rounds down range if someone sneaks up on you.
Yeah, now I don't know to what extent these were out at Gallipoli and thereabouts, to be honest. They were in Germany, or from Germany, a substitute standard for the Luger, which the C96 also was. I think I'd rather have either of those than this, if I'm honest, but it's a cool addition. Does kind of ram home the idea that this is just your self-defense weapon, and if you have to use it, someone's let you down. Minor point on the finger outside the trigger guard. I'd be amazed, frankly, if anyone was doing that in 1915. Well, no, I wouldn't be amazed. There were, so sport shooters, professional pistol shooters would occasionally say, don't put your finger on the trigger until you're ready to shoot, which is received wisdom today. Most people took no notice of that. And military training, my theory is Vietnam, American conscripts in Vietnam, replacements, they're having to keep everyone to the same basic level of competency and safety, and that's where we get the finger outside the trigger guard becoming almost a mantra, quite rightly, for safety. Nice to see the Webley make an appearance.
The other Webley.
Yeah, the Webley Auto. Some good meaty sound effects there, as you'd expect from a giant chunky pistol like this. This definitely feels meatier and more effective than the Beholla.
Yeah, definitely. I was using it in the hands of an officer, so blowing your whistle and charging at the head of the column, you needed something that packed a bit more of a punch, I think.
So Royal Navy, Royal Naval Air Service, Royal Horse Artillery. Not massively likely to find its way out there, I wouldn't have thought. Well, I say that. Definitely RFC pilots. Well, yeah, some RFC pilots I think got hold of them. Certainly Royal Naval Air Service. So, again, not impossible that it'd be out there. I think we have an episode on our channel of this. We certainly have drawers full of them. You'll forgive me for not showing you one today, but I have quite a full trolley. It's a quirky, weird thing, especially with the, like, cut off, the magazine cut off. Very strange choice. Let me single load my self-loading pistol. The stocked Royal Horse Artillery version is very cool. When you think this is coming out, this version for the Royal Navy, 1912, oddly enough, there are better pistols available by 1911 than this. Clue. More than one. This is kind of a singularly British attempt to catch up with the Germans, the Americans, the Belgians. Much as I enjoy it as a design, it's really not great. But undeniably cool. Big blocky slide, 4.55 cartridge, but automatic, like not without the whacking great rim. Has a sort of, steampunk's the wrong word, but maybe a diesel punk vibe to it. The slide rails on the bottom of the frame as well. I suppose they're always on the bottom of the frame, but there's so much frame above them.
All of the pistols are modelled as being fired one-handed as well.
Excellent.
As was the fashion at the time.
As was the style at the time, yes. Yeah. Extra points if they included an onion to hang on your belt. Enjoying the Maxim here. So we've got the 1909 Turkish or Ottoman version of the Maxim gun that almost everyone has got, except the French. Even the Americans have got it when they arrive before the Browning 1917 ramps up and becomes the standard. There is an American Colt-made Vickers gun. Anyway, off the point. This is not that. This is the Model 1909 Maxim. So it looks like we're emplaced here. We haven't picked it up off the tripod.
Yeah, all these heavy machine guns, you have to either approach an emplacement or make your own. You can't carry these with you.
Yeah. Now, of course, and this can't be a criticism because it's a video game and we've got to have fun. This kind of swinging traverse thing, very rarely done. In a pinch, if you're being about to be overwhelmed, then you'll these things are designed to be fired, essentially locked off, making very small adjustments, tapping the spade grips, firing at longer distances. Even at closer distance, a skilled gunner would be better off firing short bursts, tapping, firing short bursts. You can slacken it off and get more traverse from your tapping. What you don't want is this wild swinging office swivel chair style traverse and elevation. You certainly don't want it freely swinging up and down, left and right. Might feel great to use, but your effect is vastly reduced because any amount of movement back here translates to yards of movement of the bullets, dispersion-wise, at the far end. But model very nicely. Love the crank handle flying away. My main experience with Maxim pattern guns being on the Vickers, I am cringing at the lack of fingers over the spade grips, but that's not really an issue if your crank handle isn't going to mash your thumbs. This is a feature of the Vickers where they lightened and turned it upside down inside itself, as it were. And you end up with a crank handle that's alarmingly close to your knuckles. You can see there the four fingers are pulling back the safety lever, and the thumbs are pressing the firing lever, or firing button, which is a lever, in the middle there. Feed-wise, so good rendition of fabric belt there. Rounds coming in from the right, and the empty belt streaming out on the left. That's all fine. I'm guessing you don't ever have to do a load where you have to pull the belt and cock it twice.
You will see a reload.
Of course you will, yeah. But infinite ammo emplaced guns are not really a thing in this kind of game, I guess.
No, you have 250 round boxes, so you can get away with firing it for a while.
Okay.
But you will have a lengthy reload.
Yeah.
If you do run that belt dry.
Love it. Excellent. We're pulling the starter tab across. We're cocking it twice. We even cleared the gun correctly to begin with. 10 out of 10. And, talking about heating or artificially reduced. That's often how emplaced guns are used in games, of course. Well, if you're ever going to just absolutely cane a machine gun, it's a water-cooled gun like this. You can fire 600 rounds continuous. This is on the Vickers, but I'm sure it's roughly true of the others as well, before the water starts to boil, and you're not immediately melting the barrel at 600. It's possible to fire a gun continuously like that. Now, you wouldn't want to do that in reality, don't get me wrong, but in a video game scenario, it's not unreasonable. There we go. Correct grip for the Vickers spade grips. That's what we like to see. Now, as to whether machine gunners would shout King George loudly at the enemy while firing their Vickers Maxim Mk.I machine gun, I personally doubt it. Not very British. But of course, who knows? Someone might have done. The Machine Gun Corps, the real professionals, the specialist troops that were trained for weeks to shoot and run and feed and move with, precisely fire these things at distance. I think they're far too professional to be shouting King George. Not to be outdone, I have brought another cutaway, and this is our cutaway Vickers gun, which is a very cool and lighter version of the Vickers gun. See the cutaway?
I was going to say, have you been working out, or is that gun lighter?
Substantially lighter. The barrel is cut away inside the cutaway water jacket, which is really cool. And the booster is cut away. You can see the cup there. The firing gases press back on that cup to assist the recoil action of the gun. It's still quite heavy, though. Now, the gun's super realistic, but the way it's being employed, perhaps less so. But that's just the way things are in games. Can't really be helped. The sight itself does flip up for some fairly insane ranges. And we slide our aperture, or our secondary aperture, or primary aperture, arguably, up with very fine adjustments, which we're not going to do here. We're using the battle sight. 2,900 yards is the maximum setting on this sight ladder.
Ambitious.
Well, they were fired out further than that, out beyond 3,000 yards, for creating denying an area of the battlefield to the enemy, let's say. Map predicted fire, all sorts. There was a dial sight, like an artillery style dial sight, to enable that, because you can't do that off the iron sight. Toffee Apple launcher sounds a lot less dangerous than it is. Candy apples, I believe they call them in America.
I don't think theirs has a small Lee-Enfield rifle firing blanks on it, though.
Yes, now I can't speak from a great deal of authority on these, having only seen them in photos. But they kind of are what they look like. It's a version of the, well, medieval technology of the mortar. So kind of a reverse spigot mortar in a way, sort of. One of many weapons devised for the trench warfare of the Western Front. I don't know if they were used in the East. I dare say, well, it's certainly possible.
I mostly just found the firing mechanism fascinating, that they repurposed a Lee-Enfield to fire a blank to propel that giant mortar.
Yeah, so we see that with smoke dischargers as well, although that's in line with the bore. Though, yeah, the way it's kind of just screwed in at the bottom looks a bit like an afterthought. I'm also not sure why they need the lanyard to pull the trigger when you could just pull the trigger. I don't know very much about these. I'm guessing that's based on... I think I've seen film footage as well, actually, of these being fired from the Imperial War Museum archive. So I'm sure they've done their homework on this. Almost does feel like it's like a weird combination of modern for 1915 and medieval with the giant iron balls of doom. Almost like a combination, well, like a traditional mortar, really. But of course, though, the truly traditional mortars are solid shot. Explosive shells come a bit later.
A very different system.
Yes, technically in my remit, because artillery is not always gun artillery. Although we have no original artillery in the collection that is not gun artillery, fair to say. We have a couple of replicas, a ballista, a mangonel, I think. They are not core collection items. They're there for demonstration, education purposes. This style of trench catapult, yep, seen photos of these. Now, obviously, the huge advantage these things have over earlier mechanical artillery is that you can just punt modern hand grenades or some other form of explosive ordnance. It is like a Kranakin style of loading, or cocking, like a medieval crossbow, or I guess other forms of artillery. Some very different physics to have to depict, actually, when you think about the elastic effect.
This might be completely anecdotal, but when I was playing on some of the test servers with players, I felt like the trench catapult was quieter and I was sort of noticed less. I drew less attention when I was slinging munition because it firstly wasn't firing that blank, but also the effect was much quieter. I was like, this is stealth artillery.
Yeah, I would expect that. I guess this day and age, when we've got the way sounds are represented, you almost can't help but you would know better than me. But you're creating a sound in the game. Almost by default, it's going to be quieter for the. I mean, obviously, you're going to want to do some tweaking to make it actually have an effect. I'd be amazed if that's not true, is what I'm trying to say.
I think your ear is also not tuned to a rubber thump either. You're expecting to hear like a bang of artillery. Yeah. So again, I don't know if this was intent or even how carries any truth to the history of this system.
I mean, yeah.
But I just felt noticed less.
No, it absolutely has to. Like, the explosive blowing up obviously makes a noise like any other explosive weapon. So if we compare it to the Toffee Apple launcher, that essentially is a gun. You're going to get a report once that, I'm going to call it a spigot for want of a better term, on the munition leaves the barrel. There is an uncorking pop, a gun sound. I don't know what decibels that would be, but it's loud. This thing is not loud by comparison at all. And by the time the munition has exploded near you, well, that's no help, is it? You can't. The noise of the thing firing can't help you detect it. Now, to what extent it's helpful to be able to detect? Oh yeah, we're being blown up from over there. There may be nothing you can do about that. But if in terms of detecting it, now of course the sort of battles we're talking about here what's one more bang over a load of other bangs? It's the old M1 ping thing. Does it really matter? But it's very cool that it might have the theoretical effect of a, as you say, stealth artillery might have an effect, at least in the way the game's played.
Thank you to Gallipoli for sponsoring this episode, and thank you all for watching. Let us know in the comment section below other games, movies, TV shows, and beyond you would like to see on the show, and of course, subscribe. As always, I want to give a huge shout out to all of our wonderful supporters over on the Patreon for helping to support EXP and for allowing us to make this content. Links to support Jonathan and the Royal Armouries will also be in the description below, so make sure you check those out as well. But until next episode, thank you again for watching, and I will see you very soon.